Welcome back to the Galley of the Sun. So if you hear noises in the background, today is the 4th of July. We're entertaining, the neighbors are entertaining. It is a fantastic day. And here at the Galley of the Sun, today is all about beef. Earlier today, we filmed the episode where we carved up our aged ribeye roasts. We made a whiskey aged ribeye roast that went into the ager. 45 days from now, we're gonna have magic. So what we ended up with was 8 pounds of the outer crust, which is called the pellicile. Now, as I said in the other video, you can take this stuff, you can feed it to your dogs. You can make beef broth out of it. You can make beef tallow out of it. Or you can do what we're doing today. You can make aged ground beef out of it. So the first step in this process, this stuff is tough. It's tough. It wouldn't be good to eat like this. So we're going to take this 8 pounds of pellicile. I got about a half gallon here of beef broth. We're going to put it in there and let it soak for about an hour. Once that's done, what we need for our aged ground beef is 1 part pellicile to 4 parts beef. So we got 8 pounds here. So I have a chuck roast ready and I have a brisket ready. So we're going to take 16 pounds of the chuck roast, 16 pounds of the brisket, the 8 pounds of the pellicile, grind it all up, and we will have 40 pounds of glorious aged ground beef. Now, part of that we're going to run through the grinder 1 time, and I'll talk about that when I get there. The other half we're going to run through it 2 times to get a finer grind. So let's get the pellicile into the beef broth, and then an hour later the next step will happen. If your pellicile isn't totally covered, just add a little bit of water. It's in. Now the hour wait. Okay, so we got about 12 minutes left on our soak of the pellicile. So now I have ran into first world problems. So in a perfect world, I would take my 8 pounds of pellicile, mix it with 16 pounds of brisket, mix that with 16 pounds of chuck, and have what I need. My brisket is 14.7 pounds. So I'm gonna cut up the entire brisket. We'll make up the extra weight with the chuck. Plus, because we're going to carve up the entire brisket and I'm not taking any of the fat out, we're going to make sure that what we cut out of the chuck is all lean, because we want about an 80-20 mixture. So now I just need to take this brisket, going to open it up, going to get it dried off, and then we're going to cut it into grinder-friendly pieces. All right, so we got the plastic sliced open. We're going to pull this out of here and keep as much of the blood behind as we can. And then we're going to lay this down on top of some paper towels. We'll pat the top, set that aside, try not to make a mess. Paper towels down, brisket on top of it. Now we just get that dried off. All right, so we pat the top of the brisket dry. And then we're just going to cut it into long strips that will fit into the throat of the grinder. Let's talk about the grinder for a second. You'll see it in a second when I bring it out, but we've been making our own ground beef for many, many years. Unfortunately, we haven't been smart for many, many years. So we were doing this before on a budget less than $100 grinder. It made it an incredible chore. So finally, we hit Cabela's at the right time when they had an incredible grinder on sale for a low, low price. So we picked it up. It has made our lives so much easier making this ground beef, making sausage. So definitely, you need to invest in a good grinder. So as I said before, we've been making ground beef for many, many years. And I said in the previous video that I'm now a meat snob. So the evolution has been, we started out just grinding our own chuck roast. And it was good. And then on a trip to San Diego, we discovered Slater's 50/50. That's a restaurant that takes 50% ground beef, 50% ground bacon, mixes it together, and makes the most incredible burgers you can imagine. So we started doing that. Then we discovered ground bison. So we started putting 1/3 ground bacon, 1/3 ground bison, and 1/3 ground chuck together. We have finally hit the pinnacle of ground beef, and that is taking the pellicile from the aged ribeye roast, mixing it together with both brisket and ground chuck. I am convinced that this is the master plan and the greatest formula you can come up with until we come up with the next one. Okay, so we take our ribeye roast, move it to the cutting board. The longer I can make these strips, the easier it's going to be to grind, and our finished pieces will go in here. As I said before, the length doesn't matter. But you don't want to make sure that it will fit into the throat of the grinder. All right, so the brisket is now grinder ready. Now to get the chuck roast, and we need about 17.3 pounds of that. And we're gonna remove every bit of fat we can because we have plenty of fat between the pellicile and the brisket. All right, we have our chuck roast. It is 22.9 pounds. So if I hack about 5 to 6 pounds off of this, I will have what I need. Does it have to be exact? Absolutely not. This is making ground beef. It ain't rocket surgery. So eyeballing this here, I'm going to take off this section right here, which should be about my 5 pounds, and then I'm going to cut the rest of it to be grinder friendly. There we go. This is what I'm removing. So we'll give it a quick check on the scale and see if I'm close. So that hunk that I cut off ended up being about 4 pounds. So got it packaged up, going to throw it in the freezer. We will make the rest of this roast grinder friendly. All right, so we have that huge chuck roast all cut up. As you can see, it was pretty damn lean, so I didn't have to remove much fat at all. Now it's time to get out the grinder and put all these things together. Okay, so it's time to set up the grinder now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna run everything through the first time with this coarse grind. So we want half of it to be fine ground and half of it to be coarse ground. Coarse ground is better for smashburgers because that coarse ground, when you pack it together and then you smash it, it's going to give you a lot more of the craggly ends that are going to crisp up real well. So then with the other half of it, we'll pass it through a second time with the fine grind plate. So we use our aged ground beef in beef enchiladas, in stuffed peppers, and all sorts of things. So for that, we want a much finer grind so we can get that beef all separated. I see aged ground beef empanadas in the near future. All right, it's time for the grinding. So here I have my cut up chuck is over here. I've got my pellicile in the beef broth, and I have my cut up brisket in here. So as I run these through the grinder, I'm gonna alternate between the brisket, the chuck, and the pellicile. We will mix it up. Just in my mind, this helps. As far as the pellicile, I haven't drained it because if I get some extra beef broth in this, what's the harm in that, okay? So here we go. That unique umami aroma that is coming off of this pellicile mixed in the beef broth is absolutely incredible. And since I cut all that meat in those long strips, all I gotta do is put it into the grinder, wait until that wheel gets a hold of it, and it just draws it right in. Got our first tray full in the big container here. Get that mixed up a little bit. Get that brisket, that chuck, and that pellicile all mixed together. All right, I've had a few pieces there where I got a little crazy, a little bit too thick, so I'm gonna have to trim those down a little bit. We've got all 40 pounds ground now. We've done that single grind. Like I said, we're gonna package those up, and those are gonna be for hamburgers. You'll see those in future videos. The rest, we're gonna put in the refrigerator. We're gonna have dinner, and then we'll come back and put them through a second grind to make them finer. That's for stuff like enchiladas and beer rocks and empanadas and anything else you can imagine. Be right back. Okay, so half of the ground beef has been packaged after that first coarse grind. And like I said before, we're gonna use that for burgers. Now, the last 20 pounds is gonna go through for a second grind to make it finer. Gonna take the whole kit and its associated caboodle and run it through now. And we're done. All 40 pounds is ground. 20 pounds single grind, 20 pounds double grind. It is time for me to go wash my paws. But before I do that, I implore you, hit that like button. If you like what you saw today, hit the subscribe button. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for our next episode. Till then.